Okay, so thanks for joining us, Ree and Callie. This session is going to be recorded as we'll be providing it to some other folks who weren't able to make it today. My name is Alex King Harris, and I'm the CEO of YogiTunes. And I'm here to help explain the rather complex world of public performance rights and what that's all about. So feel free at any time to ask questions. You can put questions in the chat if you like. Anything to do with music and yoga, I'm happy to talk to the best of my ability. I'll give you a little bit of a background of how I got to knowing about all this. Is that I studied music at college and then graduated and moved to Los Angeles and was immersed in the music industry in multiple parts of what makes up the broader industry. I worked in music video production. I worked as an artist and a performer. I worked with record labels. I started to get pretty strong schooling in the business side of music contracts and music copyright. And then after a period of time, I started YogiTunes, which is a streaming music service where we license music from artists from all over the world and curate that music into usable content for yoga classes. And so in many of those different experiences, particularly the music video world, and then learning how to do YogiTunes as a business, I was extensively exposed to music copyright law and the concepts that are found in the music industry. And they're so complicated. Unfortunately, as I grew to learn, there was a very conscious effort in the 1950s to fragment the ownership of music so that artists would get less and the record labels would get more. And that was sort of the foundation upon which the modern music industry rests. And whether it was done intentionally or not, it was created so that lots of people could benefit from the value that was being driven through music. And it was never really standardized in a way that's either friendly for the artist or friendly for the end consumer of the music. It's very friendly for the higher levels of corporate interest in music because it funnels a lot of money into those pools. But here we are, many years later, desperately needing kind of an overhaul in that system, and yet it's very entrenched at this point. And so we just have to go with it. We just have to understand it to the best of our ability. And so in the United States, there's a unique environment that doesn't exist in most other countries where the laws that govern how music is used are a little bit more flexible than they are in Canada, Australia, United Kingdom. And so that's what's allowed YogiTunes to essentially get in there and provide a different model for public performance, where we can be in direct relationship with the artists and negotiate these things called public performance rights and provide those to our subscribers. But we can only do that in the United States. We can't do that in Canada, and we can't do that anywhere else because of federal copyright law. So with that being said, when an artist writes a song, any artist, anywhere in the Western world, and probably in the Eastern world too, that song is initially broken into two halves. There's the half that's owned by the person who wrote the song, and there's the half that's owned by the person who publishes the song. Now, for most independent artists, that's the same. So for me, I'm my own publisher. Lots of artists give away their publishing rights to publishing companies who then own a 50% controlling stake in their work. Now, sometimes that's beneficial. The publishing company's goal is to go off and make money with that catalog by charging entities like yoga studios for the right to use that in a commercial situation. Where most of the money is involved in publishing has to do at a higher level of radio, TV, film, where all of the music that's used is tracked and reported back to publishers so that they know what's happening with their catalog. And then companies like ASCAP and BMI and CSAC represent portions of the overall catalog of all the songs in the world. And they collect those monies and distribute them back to the publishers, who then distribute them back to the songwriters. So you can see already we're at a level of complexity that is difficult to navigate. Most artists don't even understand that they have songwriting and publishing rights when they write music. So their music will either go unpublished, or they might sign those rights away, not knowing that they did that. And that's very different than what happens to their music when it goes on Spotify or any of the music services out there. That's a whole other set of rights called recording rights, because you could be the songwriter, but you might not be the recording artist that put the music out. Like if you played a cover song, for example. So I, as a recording artist, I could cover another songwriter's song, which is owned by a songwriter and a publisher. And I would have rights to the recording revenue, but I wouldn't have rights to the publishing or the songwriting. So I wouldn't get any money if that music, if the cover song that I wrote was used in a film, let's say. So that's all, again, it's pretty complicated, right? Like, why does that all exist? And we go back to the 1950s when these rules were all written into stone through copyright law to fragment an artist's ownership of their work and make it difficult for them to get all the revenue. So where it becomes difficult in the modern era is small independent venues like restaurants, bars, yoga studios play lots of music. And particularly for yoga studios, the value of music has gone to be something that's quite deep. You know, it sets a tone, it can deepen the practice. There's lots of personal flavor that gets expressed in how the teacher decides to play music in class. Yogis will adopt a teacher because they love the musical taste that they have. And then obviously music has a very ancient relationship with yoga that's much more spiritual and philosophical than just what playlist are you playing in class, but gets down to the value of vibration and resonance and how that affects the body and breath. So modern day publishing entities don't understand that the value of that equation enough, and they don't really have a system for tracking what gets played in yoga class, or what the value proposition is there. They just treat it like a blanket use, and they have a federal license that or a federal law, the copyright law, that allows them to enforce this thing called a public performance license. So ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC in the United States all own or speak on behalf of certain amounts of the entire catalog of music that's out there in the world. And anything that was published in a foreign country, they have a reciprocal agreement with. So when a yoga teacher plays a playlist in class, they're likely playing from some ASCAP songs, some BMI songs, maybe some CSAC songs, but there's no real way to know that. Well, there is, you can search the databases, but it's no one's going to go search the databases every time they play a playlist in class. And conversely, ASCAP and BMI and CSAC have no idea what songs are being played in the yoga studio at any time. So for a long time, the way that yoga studios were finding coverage was they had to pay ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC a licensing fee each year to make sure that all the music was getting played in the studio was covered under copyright law. Now, again, this is just in the US. In most countries, there's only one performing rights organization. That's a company like ASCAP that speaks on behalf of a large catalog of published music. Okay. But in Europe, there's many, again, countries sometimes have two or more. There's no real rhyme or reason as to why they have one or more performing rights organization. In the States, ASCAP is a little bit more independent and a little friendlier. BMI is a bit more corporate. And CSAC mostly speaks on behalf of classical music, classical and jazz. They don't have as much eclectic music in their catalog, but they can enforce to any studio they want. They can go in and say, you need to pay us a licensing fee because you're probably playing some of our music throughout the year. And they have no one has any way of determining that except for these exhaustive searches. So a while back, we knew about this, partly because for me as an artist, my music was getting played in yoga studios every day all over the world. And I never once saw a penny of the public performance royalties that were being collected at that independent studio level. They were getting paid to PROs all over the world for the license to play music in class. But because no PRO knew that my music was being played, and I'm not a top 40 artist that is tracking on their charts, I never saw a penny of that. And amazingly, there's over $140 million collected annually and in independent venues, and most of that doesn't go to the right artists. So the thing is, a lot of these PROs know that this system doesn't function well, but they haven't come up with a better solution. And there's probably one in the works down the road, but so far we're still sitting here in this place of like, why am I paying these companies money? Now, again, in the US, YogiTunes was able to come up with a solution where we could directly license public performance rights from the writers and publishers and give those rights to studios and make sure that the music being played in studios was tracked through our system, and then we could pay public performance rights back to the writers and publishers. Unfortunately, in every other country, and we've tried, we can't do that because federal copyright law gives exclusivity to the PRO in that country. So in Canada, it's called SOCAN. They have the exclusive right to collect public performance rights from independent venues in Canada. And they admit that their system doesn't function well, that independent artists don't get paid well from these monies, but they don't have to change because federal copyright law is very slow to evolve. And so they're not about to go and give another company exclusivity or part of the exclusivity because they rely on their collection of monies to keep their budgets going, to keep their staff employed, etc. So again, in the States, we solved that problem. We made it much simpler. One license that comes through us. You pay YogiTunes a monthly fee. We give you the rights to perform that music in your classes, and we pay the artist directly. They get compensated. Problem solved. In every other country, you still have to pay the performing rights organization for the right to play music in class. Now, again, as an artist, I don't think it's a very fair system. I would advocate for change, but in trying to change that from the inside out and understanding the law, we got hit with these huge blocks of these big federal copyright bills that are very difficult to reshape given the modern way that music is used. So that being said, YogiTunes is limited in its catalog. We can only license music from independent artists. We can't go to a major record label and do a deal with them because the way in which at a major record label level, let's say they have 50,000 artists in their catalog, the songwriter and publisher rights for that catalog is so fractured and diverse that there's way too many people involved to get everybody to agree to do a deal with a small player like us. Now, if we were Spotify, we could probably go, and this has happened, we could go and say, hey, we want to pay you the rights to include performance in our library for whatever reason. And they might be able to negotiate that for the amount of money that Spotify would pay a major label. Major labels also charge an extremely high amount of money for the rights to their catalogs. So it doesn't work in our economic model. So if you want to play music that's not on YogiTunes and you're a YogiTunes subscriber, you would have to pay ASCAP and BMI and CSAC in the United States. And if you're in Canada, again, we can't provide you with the coverage. Same with Australia, UK, and the rest of Europe. So even in our journey to try and find an elegant and simple solution, we've still found these shortcomings around public performance licenses. And that's where I found our partnership with Yoga Alliance has been really beneficial. Most people, if it comes down to it, are probably playing music that is governed by ASCAP. They're a pretty popular performing rights organization in the States, and they have reciprocal agreements with all the other PROs all around the world. So they represent a huge catalog of music. And they've given a discount rate to Yoga Alliance. And they also are aware of YogiTunes. So when people reach out to ASCAP as a yoga studio owner to see are they covered, they'll also let studios know about YogiTunes and what we do, that our music is really focused on the yoga niche and that we provide comprehensive coverage as long as teachers are playing from the YogiTunes catalog. Now we have about 50,000 songs and hundreds of artists, and there's lots of great stuff in there. And it is very stylized for the yoga vibe, not just traditional music, but contemporary music, electronic music, stuff that works well in the background. So there's a certain value to being a YogiTunes subscriber in the way we curate music, but also the fact that that license is covered. And then if your teacher's stylistic vibe is outside of that, like they love playing Spotify and they want to be able to play some Aretha Franklin or some Bob Marley or whatever, you're definitely going to be wanting to have a comprehensive license set up with ASCAP and BMI. Maybe CSAC, although I would honestly leave that one out unless they were hounding you and they could prove that you were playing their music, again, because their music is so restricted to jazz and classical. it's more likely that it's in ASCAP and BMI. Now, BMI hasn't negotiated any kind of discount rates with Yoga Alliance. ASCAP has. And so if you are a Yoga Alliance member, you can qualify for a discounted rate through the ASCAP Yoga Alliance partnership, but you still have to pay the full rate for BMI. And I'm not sure what those rates are. They change from year to year and have to do with the size of your studio. They have different tiers of licenses. In other countries, they can get quite expensive. In the UK, for example, you're charged a base rate and then a per customer rate. So they estimate how many customers you have flowing through your business, and they charge you a licensing fee per person. So it can get up into the thousands of dollars. And sometimes studios just decide to not play music, or they decide to not pay the fees. Unfortunately, the PROs are fully within their right to come after you and threaten you with copyright infringement fines, which can get very expensive. So this is another unfortunate part of the situation, is that they have quite a bit of authority to come in and say, look, if you're not paying our licensing fees, you can pay copyright infringement fines. And they're expensive, hundreds of times more expensive than paying a licensing fee. So that's the same in every country. Every PRO can come in. Some of them are not so friendly. We recently talked with a client, a YogiTunes subscriber, who'd had a very difficult interaction with CSAC. I read the transcripts and I was kind of appalled that they were that disrespectful and threatening. I think some of them rely on that threat to try and police public performance rights licensing. ASCAP's way friendlier because they're basically independent artists themselves. So they get what it's like to be an independent business owner, and they're not trying to make things worse. They're just trying to keep people adhering to federal copyright law. So that's basically a comprehensive view of what it's all about. It's not the most exciting thing ever. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to throw that in chat. If you have specific instances where you've been approached by a PRO and you're not really sure what to do, you can summarize that in chat. If there's anything else about the topic, I'm super happy to answer questions. You can also raise your hand and unmute yourself if you want to talk your question out versus putting it in chat. My sense is that, for small independent business owners, most people probably fly under the radar of these licenses and just opt to not deal with the system. And I can totally understand that. That was another reason why we developed the YogiTunes platform, was because we recognized that for small business owners, paying exorbitant licensing fees was a crazy idea. And we wanted to make an affordable way to also compensate the independent artists for the value that they bring to a business, because they bring brand value just by the quality of their content. And so that's another reason we keep the YogiTunes music pool quite curated, is we bring in only the highest quality musicians, so that the value exchange of what it costs to subscribe to YogiTunes to get your public performance rights in the US and get access to a very curated catalog makes sense for both the small business owner and for the artist, as far as what ends up being revenue generating for them. And then we also try to find other ways to help monetize music for independent artists, because we're like ASCAP, we're independent artists ourselves and working to try and come up with a better model than this antiquated performing rights setup that we have from way in the past. So that's pretty much it on public performance rights. Another few things I'll sort of comment on, as I'm not seeing any questions, which is totally fine. This is really just self-serve information. Again, for those who showed up a little bit late, the session is being recorded, so we'll send the recording out if you missed anything in particular and have questions. It's just to talk a little bit about the value that music brings into yoga and my experience. I've been doing this for 25 years. I've been performing music in yoga classes with world-renowned yoga teachers, traveling all over the world, watching how music and yoga shape the practice, the teacher, the brand, the studio, sitting right in the middle of all of that, and also helping to evolve the sound of yoga through my original music work with Shaman's Dream, Desert Dwellers, Liquid Bloom, stuff that ended up becoming pretty staple in the yoga community worldwide from the late 90s until up till recently. And I think sometimes what I notice in yoga teacher training is there's not a ton of bandwidth for studying on a more theoretical and formulaic level the power of music in yoga, especially as it's evolved from its ancient roots of being used more as a meditation tool through chanting and simple instrumental use through bhakti, to becoming more of a performance tool that teachers use to enhance the flow of yoga in class. This is a very new development in yoga. Is what makes that good and what makes it distracting. Again, because there's not a lot of formal education around this, it's sort of trial and error to try and figure this out. But over time, what I've noticed is that, for one, I think there's an excessive amount of pressure sometimes on yoga teachers to be really great music curators and DJs, which sometimes can take away from their focus as a teacher. And it's a pressure I totally understand. And then sometimes there's creative choices in a yoga class that are questionable as to whether they help deepen the breath, deepen awareness of the body, deepen the principles of yoga, deepen union, or whether they're more of a personal taste thing that probably doesn't belong inside of a yoga class, but it's more just that, like, I love this song, so I'm going to play it for yoga. Now, there's lots that we can unpack in that conversation. And there's nothing wrong with experimenting and seeing what works and what doesn't work. That being said, some music works really, really well sitting in the background as music that is good to teach over, and other music comes into the foreground very strongly. And that's a first thing to notice as a teacher is this song commanding my students' attention, or is it elevating my capacity to deliver my instruction? Because you can use both really skillfully. There might be a reason why you want them to focus on the lyrics or the sound of the song, because it helps deliver your teaching more deeply. There might be a mantra, or no matter what the language is, there might be a message in that music that helps you convey your teaching in a very eloquent way that only music can. Or it might be a total distraction to what it is that you're trying to set as far as your teaching in the container. And over time, I think what I've learned is I watch body language. I watch, does this song help people deepen in their breath, go deeper into their focus? Are they more present? Do I feel the room attuning into a feeling of unity? Or do I feel like that's starting to fade? Volume can also do that. Is this music too loud? Is it too quiet? These are some simple things to look at when you're bringing music into the space, so that you're in a more compositional role with music rather than just putting it on and hoping for the best. Over time, I'm sure most teachers develop a personal style with music that allows them to feel very supported by the music that they're playing, and knowing that that's meeting their audience. And audiences tend to gravitate towards teachers where they like their musical tastes and get into that. And that's a wonderful thing. The thing you also want to be aware of is this music providing me with comfort, because I don't feel fully grounded right now in this class, and am I fully present? Because music can sometimes be good for you, but not for everybody else. And that's, again, where you just have to take the time to really connect well with your class and really make sure that the music is in service to that, to you being really present, and to you feeling the class becoming ever more present. In general, I tend to veer away from English lyrics unless there's a really specific reason why I'm using that English lyric, because I notice from my own practice that it's just distracting, because I'm going to want to understand what the lyrics are saying. That's normal. That's human intention. And then I'm split between what the teacher's saying and what the lyrics are saying. I tend to find music that's sentimental, that talks about heartbreak and relationships and modern pop concepts, to be super distracting from my yoga practice, because I want to feel the eternal. I want to feel things that are timeless. And so if I'm noticing music that is taking me away from that sense of timelessness, then it's likely that it's going to be a distraction. Speaking of distractions, I'm in Mexico. There's a very loud truck driving by, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm hoping that that's being tuned out by Zoom's compression algorithm. It's very loud for me. So the deeper level of music, which is why I think as an artist, Desert Dwellers and Shaman's Dream was so successful, is that we were looking at sound from a point of view of trauma sensitivity, what entrained the body and the nervous system into a parasympathetic state where the breath took over deeply on its own, and what sound elements did that. And there's certain things that we would sort of loosely coin as shamanic sounds that entrain the body right away and start the body coming into attunement. And some of these elements you'll find in music cultures across time that use music for healing, such as shakers and rattles with a warm drone underneath that. So just the presence of a warm drone gives people this sense of universality, connection, presence, awareness. And it's a very psychologically deep thing to have this background hum, an om, that's just there, holding you. So often when I start a class, I'm always bringing that in, a little bit of holding. What is that soundscape that's going to hold people, let them land into their practice? And then how do I introduce rhythm? What's going to be the moment at which I decide to start bringing in elements of rhythm that are light enough for people to transition slowly from that feeling of being held to starting to attune their breath with that rhythm and feel the spaciousness of the composition so that they're really hearing the teaching, but underneath that, their body's starting to entrain to this feeling of being held with rhythm. Furthermore, how can I bring an element of devotion into the soundscape? Because that's really, I want people to feel the bhakti. I want them to feel their devotion to the practice, to the power of yoga, to the power of breath. So how do I bring that sense of devotion in, especially at the beginning, so that they're grounded into the principles of yoga and kindness and compassion and love? And then how do I stoke the fire when I need them to start moving and they're working hard? Boom, I'm into songs that are fiery and pushing. If I'm in a yin class, I don't go there. I take it really apart. Obviously, I space the music way out. What's my peak and how do I bring in songs that do that? And this is, again, what we've specialized in at YogiTunes, is finding music that sits in the background but holds the container of the teaching well, so that the rhythms are there and there's not too many distracting elements up in the front of it. And, you know, that takes a while to find music like that most teachers adopt as kind of like favorites that they keep going back to. And how do you find new ones? Now, if you're not a YogiTunes subscriber, which is of course totally cool, and you source your music on Spotify, thankfully, the recognition algorithms have gotten a lot better. So you can start a radio station on a song that you like, favorite a bunch more, teach Spotify how you like to listen to music, and it will serve stuff up for you over time that's more in line with that, and hopefully give you more content that you can play with. Something that we created in YogiTunes was ability to filter songs with or without lyrics, fast, medium, slow. So those kind of things can help, again, discover content that you might find is helpful for curating your journey. And then again, in YogiTunes, we just decided to make playlists because we know how yoga should flow. So we kind of tag our playlists with yin yoga, more stronger practice, restorative meditation, etc. So the journey's already kind of there. When it comes to the transitions back towards slowing down out of your fiery practice and towards the end, you know, having those songs obviously come back in and comfort people and bring them home and let them land and come back to their heart and feel gratitude. Those are all really important parts of the kind of architecture of the yogic journey. And nothing's better than practicing to your own flows. So if you don't practice to your flow, if you don't have enough time to do that, highly recommend taking the time, putting together a new playlist, practicing to it, seeing what happens. Where do you get distracted? Where do you not? Until you really have a feel for music creation and the process of embodiment with music. That's a great question, Eva. Yes, there is. So in our app, when you go, initially, you're in a homepage where there's lots of carousels. If you click view all yoga playlists, you'll immediately see durations as a filter. So you can click on 30 minutes, 45, 60, 75, 90, and that will change your search results to show playlists by duration. Super handy tool. And then you can also select yin or, you know, a more strong vinyasa flow or a gentle vinyasa flow. and get a combination of duration and style of yoga and go from there. And that'll give you lots of options. You can then take a playlist that we've made that fits your liking as far as duration and style, and you can add and remove and change songs to your liking as well if you want to further customize. Okay, so did I discuss YogiTunes licensing to cover live in studio only, or does it only cover virtual streaming and replay? Yes, so the YogiTunes license only covers music that's recorded, that's streaming through our app. We can't, by federal copyright law, cover live music inside of your studio. But what you can do with most independent artists is you can actually have a direct arrangement with them where they agree to give you their public performance license. Now that this is a tricky thing. It's not easy. They have to own and control their publishing. If they're playing a song that's been written before and someone else owns the publishing rights to it, then they can't give you the rights to it. And artists have to know their stuff to be able to do that. So unfortunately, if that's the case and they don't know whether or not they have publishing rights, or they don't own and control all their own rights, then you would have to pay ASCAP and BMI in the States in order to cover songs that they may have published already, the live performance there. So now, if the artist happens to be in YogiTunes, they can play live in your studio, and we'll cover you for that. So in the eyes of PROs, there's no difference between you streaming music and you having live performance of it. It's the same thing to them. That's all a public performance of music. The question is that music in the YogiTunes catalog? Is that artist in the YogiTunes catalog? If not, then you can't get the coverage through YogiTunes. You would have to go through ASCAP and BMI in order to get comprehensive coverage for live music. That's the same for bars. They all have to pay ASCAP and BMI for bands that come through and play in their space. Yes, YogiTunes covers you in Zoom. So YogiTunes covers you for all online use, as long as you have YogiTunes Business Plus or YogiTunes Studio 8 or Studio Unlimited. So we have a couple of less expensive tiers of our commercial platform that don't cover video licensing, and you'll see it in the descriptions under the pricing plans. The reason why we do it at the higher price tiers is we pay additional rights to the artists for their use of their music online. But that covers Zoom, any other teaching environment, which is actually a really great conversation that we can talk about around YouTube. So here's how YouTube music works. YouTube has agreements with all of the published works in the world, and they provide revenue back to all of the artists and all the publishers and all the songwriters through reciprocating agreements. And most of that is generated through ad revenue or premium subscriptions. YouTube has an automated system that listens to all the music that's embedded in all the videos, and it tracks all of that and pays that back to performing rights organizations, which gets distributed out to songwriters and publishers. When you post a video that has music on it, assuming you're not monetizing that video, so monetizing means you have more than 1,000 subscribers and you're generating ad revenue for yourself from the content that you post, which is not the norm for most yoga content out there. Most yoga teachers are not hard driving their channel to make it a monetization strategy. Most yoga teachers are sharing YouTube videos with their community, and it's below the threshold of making money. Okay. Studio 8 does include Zoom rights, yes. So what YouTube will do when you put music to a video is they'll send you a copyright notice, which is not the same as copyright infringement. A copyright notice just means, hey, we recognize you have music in your videos. We know who owns the copyrights to that music. And if any ad revenue is generated from the views of this music through the video, we will pay the artists through our channels. So don't worry about it. That's what a copyright notice means from YouTube. Copyright infringement is when you try to claim money from a video and you don't own or control or have a licensing agreement with the music that you're using. Okay. If you do have the rights to the music, then what happens is the artist can tell YouTube that you have the rights through a process called whitelisting. So we do that sometimes. We go through we have a panel to do that. And we say, look, this video here is clear. They can monetize the music because they've paid us a licensing fee or we have some kind of arrangement. If you try to monetize and you don't have the rights, then YouTube will send you a potential copyright infringement notice just saying, hey, don't do that. We'll ban your channel if you keep trying. I think it's 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing. Because people try to do it all the time. They just don't realize what the law is or they don't care. And so YouTube will shut them down. Now, that doesn't happen very often in yoga content, honestly, unless you're doing a more structured yoga play where you like want to launch a huge YouTube yoga channel and you've got funding and tons of marketing and you want to drive subscriptions really big. It's not the tendency in general. So you can put music to YouTube videos. Don't worry about the copyright notices. They come through. All's well. Just know that your viewers, unless they're subscribed to YouTube Premium, are going to get ads halfway through your yoga content. And that's just the model for how they generate revenue. Advertisers pay YouTube. YouTube pays the content owners, the music owners from that ad revenue. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, when you have a YogiTunes subscription, one thing we do is help you navigate YouTube. So if you get a communication from them because you put YogiTunes music on your class and put it on YouTube and you don't understand it, we'll help you through that process. It's just something we do as part of the subscription so that you don't get confused. And if there is a situation where you have music and you want to monetize the video, we can help you license that. As long as the music's in the YogiTunes catalog, we can approach the artist and say, hey, do you want to license it for this? This is the fee. You know, it's a buyout, maybe $150 to put this song to this video. We can help you with that. It's not something that we advertise necessarily, but we're happy to do it if it's a situation where you want to make a monetizable, you know, high view level video of yoga and you want some music from YogiTunes in that. So hopefully that all makes sense. You're welcome, Tracy. My pleasure. Now, there's a few other situations with online music where it's just straight up frustrating. Facebook is absolutely horrific in how they deal with music. So is Instagram. They have the capacity to mute your music even when you have the rights to it. I've put up my own music on my videos on Facebook and Instagram and had them mute it and claim I'm breaking copyright law. Even though I've then gone to my distributors and say, hey, it's okay if this video on Facebook has music, I'm cool with it. I still get the stuff muted. They'll take content down, even if you have the rights. They're terrible. I personally, and they have no monetization strategy. So they're not really paying musicians for the use of music. They just basically licensed a bunch of mainstream music and want content creators to use their music. And they pay cheap rates for it and try to force anything else out by making their automated responses really ridiculous. So not a huge fan of how Meta deals with music. I haven't spent much time in TikTok, but I would guess it's similar. There's an automated way in which it recognizes it. And I don't know what they do. Again, most people either experience no problem or randomly it'll just mute some content on you and tell you why. You used to be able to go through an unmute process with Facebook. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. That's why we generally recommend staying away from posting classes on Facebook Live or Instagram Live, and just use their baked-in library of music if you want to put content out there and not have a problem with it. Where else? Vimeo now has a music listening platform. They used to not, but they have a new one baked in. We cover you on Vimeo. I haven't played around with it enough to see what their automatic enforcement is like, but it's good to be aware that as platforms mature, they get the ability to automatically listen to music, and then they have their own way of deciding what to do with that, depending on whether they are actively paying for the rights for music or not. And YouTube has kind of been leading the way with that. So they kind of have the best model out there. Another thing we should talk about is if you want to build your own online platform, let's say you want to build a meditation app, or let's say you charge your students a subscription fee to get into a specific area of your website and you want to sell guided meditations or yoga classes that have music to them, YogiTunes doesn't cover you for that. That's a very different situation where you are what's called taking content in perpetuity, so you're putting it up there forever or for however long the service lasts, and you're charging money that you decide what to charge people, and the cost of that, and they can watch it as many times as they want, and you profit from that. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. We love seeing entrepreneurial spirit in content creation, but it falls outside of the governing license that we have with artists. And so if you're taking that avenue seriously, we have a little link on the footer of our website to license music. We recommend you get in touch with us, explain the concept of your platform, what you want to do, how big you want to grow it. And then we usually either recommend that you go with a low-cost licensing option for music. There are stock music licensing platforms out there. One I'll put in chat is called Artlist. That's one of them. There's another one called Epidemic Sound. These are not places where you're going to find highly curated selection of yoga-friendly songs. These are more places where documentary filmmakers go. There's some cool stuff there. You can find very affordable ways to license music for commercial use that's not teaching a live class online, but is you like building a meditation app or something like that. If the platform's going to go big and they want to work with us, we work out a deal that's more exclusive with artists and come up with an enterprise licensing fee for that. Some other examples of where we couldn't cover you is, like, let's say you wanted to take YogiTunes music and put it in a video and upload it to Insight Timer. We can't cover you there. You'd have to get the permissions directly from the artists. And again, that's just because of the complexity of music licensing. A lot more licensing infrastructure is required for that kind of use. And so we have decided that it's just too expensive for us to be negotiating those rights for all these different situations for people. And so we stopped doing that. But we're happy to help if and when we can, if it makes sense. That being said, we are planning to do something like Epidemic Sound and launch a licensing platform for different kinds of uses, but it's a slow process. And so we're just doing it at our organic pace, and we'll get there when we get there. But it is something that we'll probably be offering in the future, a way to take music from us and put it into whatever kind of monetizing strategy you want. So I think that's where we'll close. I think that's a pretty comprehensive coverage of all of the complexities of licensing music, public performance rights, how to use music well in class. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to us anytime at yogitunes.com. If you are a Yoga Alliance member, you can access a 30% discount rate through the Yoga Alliance member portal. So you just log into Yoga Alliance and go to their member perks, and you'll see YogiTunes, and you can access a discrete area of our website through that portal and get a 30% discount on your subscription, something we only offer Yoga Alliance members. And again, you can either get an individual subscription for YogiTunes or a studio level subscription. And we're happy to talk about the differences of that on our website. You can chat us directly on the site or ask us through email. So yeah, glad it was helpful for you, Tracy, and everybody else. We will post a recording of this, so feel free to share that with any of your teacher friends that you think might have enjoyed this talk. And thanks again for coming, and I wish you a beautiful rest of your day. Namaste.